Jimmy Haslam didn't just fumble a draft pick. He humiliated Shedeur Sanders on the national stage. And the worst part? It feels like he meant to. Picture this. You're a rising quarterback, stacked with college stats, undeniable field presence, and the kind of cool-headed leadership that NFL teams allegedly dream about. Your father is a football legend, a Hall of Famer, who turned a struggling HBCU into a headline machine, and then gave Colorado one of the most watched seasons in recent memory. You are Shedeur Sanders. You've done everything right. But somehow, when draft day rolls around, the conversation isn't about your skill, it's about your surname. And when the Cleveland Browns select you, their owner, Jimmy Haslam, turns around and acts like someone dragged him into it at gunpoint. If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed. Let's be real. The moment Haslam publicly stated that he never wanted Shedeur Sanders, the mask dropped. This wasn't a clumsy PR misstep or a misunderstood comment. It was a deliberate public distancing from his own draft pick. The subtext? Loud and clear. Haslam didn't just doubt Shedeur. He didn't want the baggage that came with being tied to Deion Sanders. A man too loud, too confident, too black for the NFL's comfort zone. And yeah, that's not just speculation. When Lewis, Riddick, and Stephen A. Smith step up and start calling out the hypocrisy, that's when you know it's not just a sports debate anymore. It's a cultural reckoning. Because what we're watching isn't just about football. It's about legacy, race, image control, and how the NFL treats players who don't shrink themselves to fit into a sanitized, whitewashed version of team player. Shedeur, like his father, refuses to be quiet. And the league, it still doesn't know how to deal with that. From the jump, this entire draft situation smelled off. Shedeur's combine performance, his game footage, his leadership under pressure, none of it screamed controversial pick. And yet, the NFL machinery didn't know where to place him. Suddenly he was overhyped, too flashy, too tied to Deion. Let's translate. They didn't like that he came with a voice, a perspective, a family that refuses to shut up and play. Jimmy Haslam's comments confirmed what a lot of black football fans have felt for years, that when you're a black quarterback, especially one with swagger and identity, the rules change. If you're confident, they call you arrogant. If you're vocal, they say you're a distraction. If your dad is a legend who dares to speak out, they act like you're a liability before you even touch the field. And the Browns weren't even subtle. Haslam didn't hedge his words, didn't try to spin. He just said it. I didn't want him. That's the kind of thing you whisper in meetings, not something you toss into a press conference like it's weather talk. What message does that send to Shedeur? To the locker room? To fans? Let's not pretend this is normal. When a team drafts a white quarterback with a famous last name, think the Mannings or even McCaffreys, they roll out the red carpet. Legacy is a plus, a sign of pedigree. But when Shedeur enters the scene with a Sanders name, it suddenly becomes drama? Why is legacy a strength for some and a stain for others? Stephen A. broke it down clearly. This isn't about performance. It's about perception. And that perception is skewed by race. When a black quarterback enters the league with confidence, with media training, with a social following and a famous father, the league tightens up. Suddenly, it's not about football anymore. It's about control. Let's not forget the NFL's long, twisted history with black quarterbacks. For decades, they were steered away from the position altogether, considered too athletic to have the intelligence for a QB. That was the racist dog whistle of the 80s and 90s. And while we moved past the overt commentary, the coded language remains. Now it's about attitude, coachability, and fit. But it all means the same thing: conform or you're a problem. Shedeur, to his credit, didn't take the bait. He's kept it classy. No clapbacks, no shady tweets. But why should the burden be on him to remain professional when the owner of the team is out here doing press runs like a bad ex? Let's not overlook what Lewis Riddick pointed out either. This kind of statement from Haslam doesn't just damage Shedeur's standing in the locker room, it actively sabotages his trajectory. You're a rookie quarterback. You need backing, trust, and time. Instead, you get your boss going on record saying he didn't want you. Imagine showing up to work after that. It's not just a lack of support, it's corporate sabotage with cleats on. And while some fans try to spin this as honesty, let's call it what it is. Unprofessional, harmful, and racially coded. No one's saying you have to blindly hype your draft picks. But public disrespect? That's a choice. A targeted one. The irony? Shedeur Sanders isn't even flashy in the way people claim. Watch his interviews. He's measured, thoughtful, composed. He has a social media presence, sure, but so does every modern athlete. The difference is he's Deion's son, and people expect him to play to that image. And when he doesn't shrink, it unsettles them. Meanwhile, Jimmy Haslam gets to hide behind the shield of business decisions while throwing a young athlete under the bus. A young black athlete whose only crime was carrying the wrong last name into the wrong locker room. And you have to wonder, why even draft him if you didn't believe in his potential? If you didn't want a Sanders brand, why pull the trigger? Was it a stunt? A last-minute play for attention? Did someone in the front office push it through only for Haslam to slam the brakes publicly? Whatever the reason, the result is the same. Shedeur is now stuck on a team that doesn't value him, under a spotlight that was never meant to celebrate him, only contain him. This isn't just bad management. It's indicative of the NFL's broader problem. A league that still struggles to accept confident, unapologetically black quarterbacks without demanding they dull their shine. We saw it with Cam Newton. We've seen it with Lamar Jackson. Now we're seeing it with Shedeur Sanders. And let's talk about that double standard. If Shedeur had a meltdown, if he clapped back, he'd be labeled immature, uncoachable, a locker room cancer. But when Haslam does it, it's called transparency? Please, the truth is, Shedeur never stood a fair chance in Cleveland. Not when the owner made it clear he didn't believe in him. Not when the media circled him like vultures waiting for drama. And definitely not in a league that still hasn't figured out how to support black quarterbacks unless they play the humble, silent hero. So what now? The answer is obvious. Trade him. If the Browns won't invest in Shedeur, another team should. One that sees his potential, not just his press clippings. Because right now, his career is being held hostage by an owner more concerned with optics than opportunity. Shedeur deserves better than this. He deserves a team that understands that legacy isn't a threat. It's a foundation. He deserves to be coached, not controlled. He deserves to be judged by his arm, not his last name. And if the Browns can't deliver that, then hand him over to someone who will. Because talent like Shedeur's doesn't just go away. It gets buried, misused, and eventually wasted. And that's not just a loss for him. That's a loss for football. And let's go even deeper, because this isn't just about Jimmy Haslam and one quarterback. It's about the kind of coded power games that have ruled NFL front offices for decades. The kind of games where a young black man's future can be decided in a boardroom filled with executives who see culture as a risk factor and swagger as a red flag. Haslam's comment didn't just slip out. It was calculated. When an NFL owner says something like, "I didn't want him," in public, in reference to his own quarterback, that's a tactical strike. He knew exactly what it would do. It undermines Shedeur's authority in the locker room. It paints him as unwanted before he's even thrown a pass. And worst of all, it signals to coaches, media, and fans that they don't have to take him seriously, because ownership doesn't. That is not just disrespect. That is sabotage dressed up as honesty. Now think about this. When was the last time you saw a white quarterback get drafted, then instantly disowned by his team's owner in front of press? You don't. You simply don't. Because when the league invests in white QBs, they wrap them in bubble wrap. Every interception is growing pains. Every locker room dispute is a leadership test. But when it's a black quarterback, every misstep becomes evidence they were never ready, that they were a mistake. Let's not forget, this isn't the first time a young black QB has been prematurely written off. Ask Justin Fields. Ask Dwayne Haskins. Ask Tyrod Taylor. Ask Jameis Winston. Different stories, same thread. Talent questioned, opportunity limited, legacy weaponized. And the fact that it's Shedeur catching this flack, that's no coincidence. He's not just another quarterback. He's Deion's son, and Deion Sanders, for all his charisma and charm, makes a lot of people in powerful positions nervous. He's unapologetic. He's visible. He doesn't defer. That alone makes him a target. And by extension, makes Shedeur a walking lightning rod for whatever resentment the league has been quietly building toward the Sanders brand. This is what makes the situation feel so personal. Haslam wasn't just rejecting a player. He was making a statement about everything Shedeur represents: his father, his image, his media presence, his social power. The message wasn't, "We don't think he fits here." The message was, "We don't want his kind here." And don't think the locker room doesn't notice. NFL players might not say it out loud, but they know exactly what that kind of messaging does. It isolates. It divides. It puts a target on Shedeur's back before the season even starts. Now, every pass he throws will be judged against the backdrop of an owner who's already thrown in the towel. Even worse, this sets a precedent. If a young black QB with pedigree, stats, and composure can be publicly dismissed like this, what does that say to every kid watching at home? That no matter how polished you are, how successful, how prepared, if you bring too much identity into the league, you'll be treated like a liability. Now, of course, there are going to be people who argue this is just business, that owners have a right to speak their minds, that not every situation is about race. But let's ask the obvious question. Why does this keep happening to black quarterbacks? Why is it always about personality with them? Why is confidence read as cockiness? Why are leadership styles scrutinized more harshly? Why does the NFL still seem to reward quiet compliance over authentic presence? Because when we strip this down, what we're looking at is the NFL's discomfort with quarterbacks who don't fit the mold. Quarterback is still seen as the face of the franchise. And whether folks admit it or not, a lot of executives are still holding on to a very specific idea of what that face is supposed to look and sound like. Shedeur, with his nil success, his media polish, and his unapologetically black heritage, threatens that image, not because he's done anything wrong, but because he refuses to shrink. Now let's zoom out. Why was Shedeur even an option for Browns? Why go through the trouble of drafting him if you're just going to announce him before the jersey even dries? Some insiders say it was a divided front office, that certain scouts and execs were sold on Shedeur's ability, while Haslam wasn't. But if that's the case, how dysfunctional is this organization that their owner can't get behind a consensus pick? Or worse, chose to throw his own team under the bus just to make a point? And while we're at it, let's talk about the doublethink here. The NFL constantly says it wants to evolve, that it wants more diversity, that it wants players who understand branding and leadership and representation. Shedeur is literally that guy. He is the blueprint for the modern quarterback. And yet, the second he walks into the wrong room, he's treated like he's a problem child. It's almost like the league wants the aesthetics of diversity, without actually dealing with the power shift that real representation brings. They want players with stories, but not players who write their own narrative. And Shedeur, just like his dad, refuses to be anyone else's storyline. The Browns should have seen this coming. If you take Shedeur Sanders, you're not just getting a QB, you're getting a brand, a leader, a legacy. That's not a bug. That's a feature. But Haslam's comment shows he never understood that. Or worse, he did, and that's exactly why he didn't want him. This moment also pulls the curtain back on how shallow some of the NFL's supposed meritocracy really is. Because when it comes to Shedeur, it's not about merit. It's about management. Managing image. Managing tone. Managing power dynamics. And when those things get threatened, the old guard panics. Look no further than how media outlets covered this whole debacle. Some barely even criticized Haslam. Others spun it into a miscommunication. A few tried to pin the drama on Shedeur himself, saying he brings too much attention. But let's be honest, attention isn't the issue. The type of attention is. If Shedeur was a bland, blank slate quarterback who gave robotic post-game interviews and tweeted Bible verses, this wouldn't be a story. But because he shows up with presence and confidence, and the nerve to act like he belongs, suddenly he's a culture war. And let's not overlook how calculated the silence from the Browns organization has been. After Haslam's comments went viral, there was no apology, no clarification, no show of support, just radio silence. That's a team choosing complicity over accountability, and that silence speaks volumes. But in a way, it's also freeing, because now there are no illusions. Shedeur knows exactly where he stands. The rest of the league knows it too. And maybe, just maybe, this opens a door for someone else to step in and do what Cleveland refused to: believe in him. There are plenty of teams who could use a quarterback with Shedeur's poise and leadership. Teams who actually want to evolve, who aren't scared of confidence, who won't shrink at the idea of a player having his own voice. Because let's be clear, this league has no problem with star power when it fits their narrative. They love it when quarterbacks date celebrities, land commercials, or dominate social media, as long as it doesn't challenge authority. But when that star power is rooted in black identity and built outside of the NFL's gatekeeping, suddenly it's dangerous. And if you thought this was just another rookie drama that would blow over by training camp, think again. Because Shedeur Sanders' treatment by the Browns has already ignited a much bigger conversation. Not just among fans, not just on sports talk shows, but inside the very culture of football, from locker rooms to living rooms. People are asking, why does this keep happening to black quarterbacks? And more importantly, what exactly does the NFL want from them? Let's not forget, Shedeur didn't just waltz into the league riding on his father's name. He earned his place. He stayed composed in one of the most pressure-cooked environments in college football. He took brutal hits behind a weak offensive line at Colorado and still managed to put up solid numbers. He studied the game with discipline. He handled interviews with poise. He showed humility and leadership. He was, by all measurable standards, everything you'd want from a quarterback prospect. And yet, here we are, talking about how the owner of the team that drafted him publicly dismissed him like a bad stock pick. It's almost poetic in the most depressing way, because Shedeur's experience reflects what so many black professionals experience in white-dominated spaces. You're brought in praise for your talent, expected to produce miracles. And the second your presence feels like too much, you're reminded that you were never really wanted in the first place. That's why this moment stings deeper than the average front office blunder. Haslam didn't just air out internal disagreements. He broadcasted an institutional bias, one that says, we'll take your talent, but not your identity, your numbers, but not your name, your potential, but only on our terms. And how exactly do you thrive in that environment? The NFL has always claimed to be a meritocracy. The best man plays. But the rules bend when it comes to quarterbacks, especially black ones. Look at how often they're asked to prove themselves over and over again, even after performing at a high level. Compare that to how quickly some white quarterbacks get second, third, fourth chances, despite underperforming. Just look at the revolving door of backup QBs in the league. How many journeyman white QBs keep getting picked up off waivers despite offering no upside? But when a young black quarterback struggles early, he's already on the maybe he should switch positions list. That tells you everything you need to know. So when Shedeur Sanders is thrown under the bus before he's even thrown a pass in the NFL, we're not talking about a unique incident. We're talking about a pattern. Even the way the situation was handled publicly, zero accountability, zero clarification, feels familiar. It mirrors the way institutions deflect criticism about race. If the Browns thought Haslam's statement was being misinterpreted, they could have said that. If they wanted to support Shedeur, they would have. Instead, they chose silence. Because silence protects power. And sure, some fans will defend the Browns' actions, saying things like, it's not about race, it's about fit. But that's the problem. Fit has become the corporate euphemism of the century. It sounds neutral. It sounds objective. But what it really means is, does this person make us comfortable? And when the person in question is a young, self-assured black man who comes from a legacy of not playing by the league's old rules, the answer is almost always no. This is where Stephen A. Smith and Riddick's commentary hits hardest. They didn't just come with emotion, they came with facts. They pointed out the hypocrisy, the double standards, the clear discomfort that NFL leadership still has with bold black quarterbacks. And it resonated because we've seen it over and over again. Cam Newton was mocked for dancing. Lamar Jackson was told he should play wide receiver before he even got a real shot at quarterback. Jalen Hurts got more questions about his personality than his play style. Even Patrick Mahomes, as successful as he is, constantly has to dodge subtle shade from analysts who seem reluctant to crown him as the face of the league. It's a playbook that's been running for decades, just with better PR. And what's happening to Shedeur is just the next chapter. Let's also not ignore the optics of who's making the decision here. Jimmy Haslam is a billionaire owner with a history of questionable moves, including his involvement in the pilot Flying J fraud scandal. He's not exactly a beacon of moral leadership. Yet he gets to publicly trash a young black athlete with no consequences, no pushback from the league, no reprimand from the team. It's almost like he can say whatever he wants, but Shedeur, he better keep his head down and earn it. The imbalance is staggering.